Okay, I'm going to take a moment and attempt to calmly explain something that I wish many more people knew, and that is this. Silk and satin are two different things. Silk isn't satin, satin isn't silk, but they can be made of one another. Now, let me elaborate on this, because very often when I am talking about fabrics and silk with people, they might look at some of the kimono I have and say, that's not silk, because they see the different textures and think, oh, that has to be cotton, that has to be something else, that has to be something else. Silk, saying that something is silk means nothing except that it came out of a caterpillar's bottom. That is all that it means when someone says that something is silk. Unless it's spider silk, in which case it came out of the bottom of a spider. Now, satin, and when I say satin, I mean the very smooth, silky weave that we commonly expect silk to be made of. Satin is actually a type of weave. It is a way that you can weave any type of fiber in the world. You can weave cotton that way. In theory, you could possibly weave wool in that style. You can weave silk in that style. You can, and most of the satin we encounter in the contemporary world is, for better or worse, made of polyester. I'm not a fan of polyester, so I don't recommend it. But yes, satin and silk are different things. So when you enter a fabric store and someone shows you some satin, it will probably not be silk. It will actually probably be polyester, it will probably be synthetic. And if it's not that, there's a very good chance it might be viscose. And viscose is a fiber that is very often actually used to imitate silk by taking parts of a tree or plant that can't usually be made into a fabric, and they melt it down using various chemicals, and they squish it through these special tubes that turn it into teeny weeny little fibers, not dissimilar to a caterpillar's butt, except, of course, viscose is never as nice and breathable as a silk from a real caterpillar would be, because of course it isn't entirely natural, it is partly chemical, and therefore doesn't breathe as well, it's not as environmentally friendly, it just isn't as good. It isn't as good in general. Ideally you would go for real silk, or failing that, cotton. I have seen cotton sateen, and it is very nice. Obviously it isn't quite as shiny as silk satin or polyester satin, but it does have a bit of a sheen to it that is quite nice, and also has a very nice hand to it. When people talk about fabrics, they will use the word hand, and what they mean to say is the way the fabric feels when you touch it. Not just in terms of how the surface feels, but also how it feels in terms of weight, in terms of, you know, how, like, if you scrunch it up, how does it feel? If you swirl it around, how does it feel? Fabrics have so many different properties. But yes, the main thing I want to convey is that when you go and buy vintage kimono, quite a lot of them will in fact still be silk, but they won't. It's very, very rarely that you will encounter a true kimono that will not only be made of silk but also possess the satin texture. And where you do encounter them, they will probably be over 40 years old and cost you hundreds of dollars. So if you're wanting simply a cheap robe to wear at home, you don't want real silk, you probably want polyester silk, which, like I said, I don't recommend. I think you're better off going with cotton or real silk. Or if you want a true kimono, you will probably be buying silk, but then wearing it as a robe at home probably won't be as easy. Because, silk not only like, if you want it to last decades, maybe hundreds of years, you don't want to sweat into it. You want to keep it very clean and very dry. And silk also, it it tends, not always, it depends on the weave again, but most contemporary weaves of silk will shrink if you throw them in the wash or wash them by hand. They will shrink. and the dyes also often bleed, so I don't recommend pursuing them. What I do recommend is, yes, trying to take them to a dry cleaner on a regular basis and airing them out very well when you're not wearing them. And also not wearing them directly against the skin if you can avoid it. But yes, so yes, when you do go and see real kimono and you don't see them looking as silky as you might expect, please don't. This is something that happened to me. I was selling kimono and someone had the audacity to approach me and accuse me of selling fake silk, simply because it didn't look as sheeny as they were expecting. Please don't do that to people. Please don't go into a museum and accuse them of giving a fake exhibition just because the kimono don't look the way you expect. Please don't do that. It's really mostly that it's embarrassing to you, because most of the people present, including the organizers of the event, will know that you don't know what you're talking about if you say something this crazy. Yeah, that is the best recommendation I can make.